The following episode of the Maui Chamber of Commerce's Business Matters was originally broadcast on March 3rd, 2026.
Welcome to Business Matters, brought to you by the Maui Chamber of Commerce. And now here's your host, the president of the Maui Chamber of Commerce, Pam Tumpap. Good morning, Pam. How are you today?
Good morning, Gary. I am excellent today. How about you?
I am doing well. The progress of my house is going along nice, and but yeah, we're getting there.
Oh my gosh, that's fantastic. I wondered if you got up at like 1 o'clock in the morning to see, what was it, a red moon or?
No, I didn't do that.
I'm not even sure it was a red moon.
Yeah, it was a blood moon or something like that. Yeah, a blood moon, yeah.
Yeah. Something that was supposed to be spectacular.
All the years I've lived here, I've never seen a lunar eclipse. I used to get up to try and watch it, and every time I did that, it would be cloudy right where I was.
Well, we were out late last night, not quite at 1 o'clock in the morning, but it was very cloudy, and I was really excited and thought I might have wanted to get up, and I decided, nope, too many clouds. I think I'll pass.
The best view is on the morning news.
Oh, I missed that this morning, so I'll have to catch it in a little bit. But, yeah, it always is.
Yes.
That is always
yes.
you. Well, I'm glad progress is being made on your house. That is so important, and, you've gone through a lot, so I'm glad to hear that that's happening.
Yes.
And we want to thank you for all you do for our show. You are a treasure, and I greatly appreciate you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you guys, too.
Thank you. Well, folks, we are excited to have you join us again this morning. I want to just circle back on an issue, and I have an expert with us on this, but last week the Planning Commission reviewed the bill to create two new hotel zoning districts, H3 and H4, as proposed. These new districts would allow existing A1 and A2 apartment district properties impacted by Bill 9 to create continue transient vacation rental use, provided that further land changes are approved for said properties to one of the new H3 or H4 districts. So this was a step. It was a step in a direction to identify those that were really designed, not as apartments, but condotels, and to create districts that would allow that use. This morning we have Tom Cook, who is our South Maui Residency County Council member. We're so thrilled to have him on. He is the chair of the Water and Infrastructure Committee. He has been a home builder for many, many years, been in the construction industry for a very long time. And we're so thrilled to have him on this morning to walk us through this because, again, this was intended to look at use and what the intention of these different buildings were. So we're going to talk about kind of this process and how do we move from where we are now to the challenges we face and move through this very challenging time. So good morning, Tom. How are you this morning?
Good morning, Pam. I'm doing excellent. I thought about getting up and looking at the blood moon, but I slept. It's a beautiful day in Kihei. Our mango tree has flowers, but no mango yet. And I'm grateful. It's got a lot of rain, so Kihei is green. It greens up fast.
We're so grateful
to meet with you today and hopefully talk about this issue that's really pivotal in our community.
It is. This is such a pivotal issue in our community, and it's been an issue that has been sadly very divisive. As you've been with us along the way in all of our housing summits that we did, you and I both well understand how critical housing is to our ohanas. We're trying to keep people at home and for future generations, and we're getting to not just us in Maui, although Maui seems to be the worst across the nation. It's been touted as being the worst across the nation, but this is a national issue as well. But now we're looking at moves that have some devastating effects, and just even in the way we've handled it. I do want to say that at the Planning Commission, it was not as divisive as we saw the first time when we were actually taking up Bill 9. This is a different measure that we're taking up. So let's walk through how we got to this measure. This came about through the review of Bill 9 with what we call the TIG, a Temporary Investigative Group, a TIG process by the county council members. Can you talk about, and you were a part of that, can you talk about that process to get us to this bill for H3 and H4 zoning?
Gladly. I think it's important that the community has sort of an overview. Four members in the Maui County Council form the TIG. Usually it's 3. Made it 4, so it'd be really well balanced. And the intent of the TIG was to basically meet with the planning department, realtor, attorneys, to have a comprehensive discussion about Bill 9, the impacts, the Miotoya list, just sort of a real overview. We worked with the planning department representatives, and they were terrific. 2 representatives and are very engaged. Had the administration support of this process. During the discussion, it was in order to have a pathway forward for TVR properties that were, looked like and sounded like and acted like a hotel or a visitor accommodation, would have the opportunity to continue, partially to sort of mitigate the potential litigation, but mostly just to sort out how much of the housing would be appropriately freed up and kind of what the consequences would be. This measure to create an H3 and an H4 hotel zoning was well thought out and intentional. The first thought was, just to rezone them as hotel. A hotel zoning has area, height, of utilization, functionality criteria that simply didn't adapt. By creating an H3, H4 hotel zoning that was in alignment with A1, A2, so the like for like. If all of the A1, A2 properties that were currently TVRs had the potential and the opportunity, given certain guidelines that were created, to apply for a rezoning into this new category, H3, H4, which would enable them to do everything they do in A1, A2, with the caveat that they could also do transient vacation rentals. It would not have changed the functionality, the footprint. It doesn't enable them to expand and become a Grand Wailea. It's basically they can keep doing what they were doing. They could renovate, and we could keep collecting the taxes, and the employees could keep working there. I think that it was very misunderstood. If I could go to you want me to jump ahead to the recent ruling?
Yeah, I mean, we're trying to understand. Again, we know housing is critical to so many people, and sometimes people are just, again, we know that there's such a desperation around us, and we understand that, but we're trying to understand, again, what we need to do in balance housing and then deal with this issues. And please share why you think, people are against this new zoning category, which was considered a way to mitigate some of the huge challenges we will have if Bill 9 continues on the path that it is, without looking at how these units were created and meant to be, and how we need to move forward with housing. So what are some of your thoughts on why you think people are against making these new zoning categories?
I think twofold. One, some people don't understand that this is simply creating 2 new zoning categories that currently don't exist, that it is not rezoning any particular property or any properties. It is a step forward to reviewing and potentially rezoning A1, A2 properties that are on the Miotoya list. But creating H3 and H4 doesn't rezone anything. It creates a zoning category. And that's why I think it's vastly misunderstood. But I think, some of the testimony, the, very intentional testimony was, creating these new zoning categories would undermine the bills of Bill 9 to return thousands of units to long-term housing. And I think that's it's just simply really misunderstood, because if there's no way that we're going to get thousands of long-term housing for local residents. And the UHERO report and many studies and the current sales of since December and the MLS have demonstrated that many of these properties just are not suitable financially, if for no other reason, financially inappropriate and inaccessible. So that was one thing. And then prioritizing resident housing. The Lahaina Strong, they keep stating that Maui faces a housing crisis, not a shortage of vacation rentals. I get frustrated because they have been unwilling or unable to acknowledge the economic mechanics of basically our local finance. And simply by eliminating the vacation rentals without substantially enabling local residents to buy them is just destructive. It's counterproductive. And then, the community sentiment, several of the commissioners noted the community had clearly voiced a desire for fewer transient rentals and more permanent housing for local families and fire survivors. And Pam, you and I, we are passionate about affordable workforce housing for our local residents, so people can not only stay here but come home, and our community can come together and heal and grow together. And I find it frustrating when people say our local families are leaving. It's not just people from Lahaina. This Bill 9, we have an exodus of workers and people from Kihei because of Bill 9. It's nothing to do with the fire. So anyway, I'll move on, but I think it was a misunderstanding of the intent, and that was really unfortunate. When it comes back to the council, it can be overridden with a supermajority vote of 6 votes. One of the agreements in the TIG was it would be supported, this concept, and it passed 8-1 from the council. And so for the planning commission to overwhelmingly oppose it at 5-1, I was a little perplexed. It didn't seem like they understood the intent.
Well, and I want to go back to this for a moment too, because as you point out, but you and I and so many others in our community, particularly those who've been doing this for decades and really understand the nuances of what it takes to get housing. And one of the big concerning messages around Bill 9 was we can't build our way out of this. And many experts, many experts and lawmakers, who are also dealing with this issue, not just in Maui County after the wildfires, who've been dealing with this issue for a very long time, are always saying, look, our only way out is to build our way out of this, right? We have to be creating additional units. We have to be addressing that. People will then bring up our infrastructure issues. Absolutely. Do we have infrastructure issues? Absolutely, we do. Are there solutions? Yes, there are. Do we need to get on with it? Yes, we do. We got to find other ways to do this and bring down the cost of housing so we can do this. There were even proposals as we, again, I don't want to keep going too much back and forth on Bill 9 because this was a different bill, but it was recognized in putting forward these recommendations through the TIG that we would save money, versus losing money with the loss of the income, the real property tax income from, taking these units out of the higher tax bracket. We would lose money that could go towards housing. And there was even proposals to say, let's, again, we're sort of not looking at this systematically, where revenue that could have, we had council saying we'll dedicate all that revenue to creating housing and creating housing that people want and could afford to live in, the type of housing that our residents want. And we did a survey, and our survey said that, again, people's uses for the housing they desperately desired were not going to be accomplished through condominiums. From a space standpoint, places for children to play. Many have kapuna that would also be part of their household with special needs. Parking, of course, was the issue. Of course, the fees were the top issue. Were these really going to be affordable? And now, just as a result of Bill 9, in addition to the losses, we're seeing property values tank. There were comments made during the Planning Commission that I know you folks through the TIG, you went and looked at these units, right? You had members of the TIG who were, not supportive of Bill 9. Were very supportive of Bill 9. They were not, they were saying we need these units. But you had members of the TIG who also, you went and looked at these units and said, not all these units are appropriate, and here's why. And it's interesting to hear that others, Lahaina Strong and others, were saying, we visited these units and we think they're fine. What do you see as the disconnect in that realm?
My heart goes out to the community because and people have told me this, Tom, don't tell us what we're willing to live in because it's so bad right now. We'll live in anything. And I hear that. That's a valid, real deal. The challenge is if we structure our housing so that people can move up and live into something, and it isn't a real solution, we're not really solving anything. I have been and continue to be a strong proponent of utilizing the tax dollars for the county to buy land, do public-private partnerships. County owns the land; they can maintain the lease, and then have a legitimate influence onto the land use. We can build homes if the price of the land is excluded, and if the infrastructure is included, like by our tax surcharge, etc. The price of a home can be within reach of local families. It would be financeable, and with conventional mortgages, and I think we could move forward. I see the solutions are there, but it really takes a collaboration. And right now, this polarization of intent. I see a lot of the Bill 9 support coming from simply not wanting as much tourism, not liking the economic structure of the island. It's a lot deeper than just homes. And I'd like to be able to come together on it. This vote, the Planning Commission 5-1 against a simple creating a category, and the extent that it was lobbied against by Lahaina Strong frustrates me and questions the sincerity of their objective that this is a housing bill.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't a housing bill, but I understand, again, as we watched through the process of Bill 9, which was a bill that took up this measure and was examining uses for housing. It is disheartening, and it's hard to. Again, as you say, we've got to find a way to come together, because the real issue is finding the housing that people want. And I too, and it, like you, my heart totally goes out to say, again, when you're in desperate need, right, you take a tent. I used to run Maui United Way, and we would have people come to us when the homeless shelter was completely full, and it was heartbreaking because I'll never forget. There were two couples that got in a fight, and they didn't follow the rules at the homeless shelter. And one had small children, one family, and the other family that were part of this fight. The woman was pregnant and about to give birth at any moment. And the best we could do at that time, honestly, we spent, frantically trying to get them places of shelter, and literally Salvation Army came through with tents, and that was the best thing we could do at that moment, in that, in the hours of need. Later we got them into something better, but to just get them in something. And so I get that urge to say, right, we're in crisis, we need something. We don't care if we're if we deal with something that's not ideal at the moment, but once we get them in there, we still have the crisis because that doesn't last. It doesn't work long term. So we still have this crisis of how do we get them something better that is going to work and sustain their family. And go ahead.
I think our community is capable of doing that, Pam, and I'm hopeful. As far as, if I may, the discussion about being able to build our way out of it, I think that's true and not true. Insofar as like the typical supply and demand paradigm, if you build more, it becomes less expensive, doesn't necessarily work in Hawaii because we have such constraints of our island carrying capacity and stuff. And 40 million, this is what I say, 40 million people would love to live here and they can afford it, and they're not us. And so that type of demand and our limited supply mandates that we have somewhat of a hybrid supply and demand. And so that's where the government working collaboratively with industry to build homes that local residents, and there again, local residents, that's a big part of this whole contention with Bill 9. You know, who is a local family? It's like all our local residents are leaving. Well, I got news for people. There are local residents in Kihei that have been here for 20, 30, 40 years, and they're leaving. And I think many people are not considering them local residents. And I think that's sad because our community is extremely diverse. It's deep. There's a lot of, a lot of love for the island, a lot of willingness to roll up our sleeves and work together. And this Bill 9 has created this polarization of sort of us versus them, which is destructive and sad.
It is, and sadly, it is unfortunately sort of framed as division between ethnic groups here, and it's been a challenge. And again, thankfully, we didn't see the same thing we saw with the first review, which is again a different measure. But many have said, and many local residents today, actually, we still hear at the chamber from many businesses who are impacted by this measure that, our longtime local residents and Native Hawaiians, as well as other ethnic groups who have lived here and were born and raised here, who work for some of these units, who own some of these units. We saw many people testify that this was sort of their retirement plan. So it's a huge challenge. And again, the zoning was a way to say, okay, what we're trying to really weed out is those that were never meant to be or designed or meant to be housing units. And, there is also a broader issue in this. We do have to start looking at density in our housing issue. As, we've talked about before, we have to look at where we can do infill projects where infrastructure exists at one time. And by one time, I mean, pre and during COVID, we were even looking at commercial areas that weren't being utilized for areas, like the old Safeway in Kahului. That has plenty of parking, definitely is infrastructure. We were looking at things for apartments and ways for people to get in and build up, where infrastructure does exist. I mean, not saying we wouldn't have to do more. And a lot of people are asking me, as a result of all of this, like, what's happening with the Hagai Institute? Do you have any updates on that? We've heard that there's an issue that the state is still managing it until the county takes it over, and there's still some FEMA people in there. But that was housing that a lot of people were counting on earlier on. And do you have any updates on where that's at in this debate when people are looking for housing?
Yeah, I can give you an update. Basically, it is currently being used for housing to a great extent for the residents and the victims of the Lahaina fire. So the state hasn't released it to the county entirely now because basically FEMA and also the state stepping up to maintain residency for local residents until we can get more homes built. So it will be turned over to the county, and I've been through the facility. It's in great shape. It was really a wise move by both the state and the county of Maui to purchase that. I think their management structure is set up so it can be done professionally and at good cost. They have great meeting rooms in there, Pam. But in general, that is forthcoming. But right now it is being used for temporary residents. I'd like to kind of give a perspective of the sales that have occurred subsequent from December 2nd. And because this kind of colors and adds detail to the concept that these are going to become affordable local residences. And from December 2nd, this is from MLS, Multiple Listing Services. There's been a total of 80 sales from December 2nd to now. And 65 of them were out-of-state owners. 15 of them were Hawaii owners. 2 of them are from Molokai. And the vast majority of them were cash sales. So, some of the predictions of Hugh Hero and some of the other opponents who felt that Bill 9 wasn't going to meet the goals and the objective for a variety of reasons. One of them is the financing limitations due to this overshadowing potential litigation is resulting in a lot of cash sales. The prices are coming down, not drastically, but the prices have come down substantially, which is opening the door for people who have the money. Some of this, not necessarily 40 million people I talked about, but just people who have the resources to buy cash, and, it'll be possibly owner non-occupied. So the tax revenue will be significantly less. There won't be really any employment from it. It won't become local resident housing, and it isn't solving the housing issue. And that's, I think, where we need to fine-tune this. Bill 9 in itself is not a bad thing. It is something that needed to happen. And by clarifying and creating new zoning categories and sorting out, reviewing how many of them look like, act like, and can maintain their condo hotel status, about 1,700 units were not on Exhibit 2. I've reviewed some of those I think need to be added on Exhibit 2. Some of the ones on Exhibit 2 may be taken off. But there's still, even if it's 800 units, that's a substantial amount of units that could potentially become available for local residents for either long-term rentals or for purchase and maintain our tax base. So I think Bill 9 just needs to be adapted and moved forward in an intelligent way, taking everybody's concerns into consideration. And I was just disappointed the Planning Commission's 5-1 vote just negates a solution. So I remain optimistic. How's that?
I love that. Yes, because we remain. Here's the thing: we remain optimistic, and we continue to strive to find solutions. This is something that has such a broad impact in our community. We need to continue to move forward and work on those solutions. Tom, I would like you to go back because this did come up. There were members from different groups and Lahaina Strong saying that they're seeing local residents buy in, that this is working, that, we don't have to have this new zoning. Can you go through those numbers again? You mentioned 80 sales from the MLS, and you said 65 were out-of-state owners.
And 15 were Hawaii owners. And they're again, Hawaii full-time residents. 15, 2 of them are from Molokai. So 13, I assume, on the island of Maui, and 2 on the island of Molokai were purchased by local residents. So the vast majority of these sales that are occurring because of the decrease in pricing is just to create an opportunity for other people and not local residents. I don't know. I hear people are willing to live in them no matter what. And I've heard testimonies and discussed with people that live in a studio and they think it's fine. And like you said, they don't necessarily have a full family and all of the regular, wonderful local dynamics when we have big families and we live together or are close. Cash sales are common in this because it's a buyer's market. There's a lot of units for sale. I'm not a realtor, never have been. But talking with people, there's a lot of units for sale. They're not moving. And people are, I think, on the fence of whether they're going to sell or they're going to hold. And the government, us stepping up and addressing these zoning categories and the potential zoning change and moving forward is going to hopefully give people the confidence that they can trust the government to work with them. Otherwise, it's just going to be what people have been saying, and you hear, it's going to potentially just be massive litigation, which isn't good for anybody. I just want to avoid that. I don't understand. We need to work on this constructively.
And the planning department, which represents the administration, the planning department said they supported the bill.
Yeah,
to create these new zoning categories.
Yeah, they helped create it. They supported it. I just think that for whatever reason, the testimony that day swayed the commissioners, and I don't blame anybody for having heart and a concern, but they swayed the commissioners and they got off track of what the intent of this bill is. And the intent of the bill is simply to create 2 new zoning categories. It did not do anything other than that. This was the most simplistic step forward, and for it to be opposed, I think it's a matter of just how badly understood the situation is and how strongly it's being lobbied against. The statement, we worked so hard for 2 years for Bill 9, now you're just undermining it. It's like that is very short-sighted and selfish. That is not the intent. The intent was to address the Mia Toyo conditions, all the grandfathered in, straighten out the legalities once and for all, and within planning, land use, permitting, Corp Council, everybody, we all have to be on the same page moving forward. If people just keep fighting that potential solutions, we're just going to end up in a long, protracted downward spiral, in my opinion.
Well, and I'm very worried about that as well, to be honest with you. Again, watching the polarization of where we got with Bill 9, not only the division within our community, not only the way we treated it. I mean, that was heartbreaking, honestly. The loss of Aloha and the way people were treated was heartbreaking to me. But again, how do we now, with being optimistic and with understanding that we really need to find new ways, more comprehensive ways versus debates in county council when you really only have 3 minutes to talk, when you've got passion on both sides of people trying to advocate. But it seems to me we need something beyond the county council process again. We need a convening forum where we can talk about the tough issues and really spend the time educating on those issues. The planning department gave us a slideshow and was clear that this was just a zoning bill. It was a step. It wasn't everybody can automatically convert. There were so many other steps before people could even apply. It was, this was just about creating zoning categories, and it was a step.
It was demonstration that the administration's intent to have a path forward to rezone the appropriate properties existed. That's what this is. It's a path for the path forward for properties that qualify to rezone, have a category and a path forward. It doesn't guarantee anything, but by creating that, it demonstrates sincerity and integrity by our local government. And simply denying any ifs, ands, or buts is somewhat indefensible.
Yeah. Yeah, it's well, and it's costing us all more time, right? We were hoping to continue to move things forward, and again, it's a step back that's costing us all more time and energy as we continue to work on this. But I do feel like the solutions and the path forward really have to come in a different forum. The way we're going about it right now in this matter with limited testimony. I know people said there was a lot of written testimony submitted because after the last planning commission process, I've heard people say, look, we weren't going to go stand and testify and tell our story because we were demonized. So, they said, we're just going to do things in writing. We don't want to go through that again, which was hard. And again, the people I'm talking to were primarily local families that are impacted by this in other ways as well. So it's a huge challenge. If we don't address this new zoning, if we don't have this, what are the consequences of not creating zoning? What are the big issues that we're going to continue to see?
Well, first, I want to say part of my optimism, this is going to come back to the county council, and the council can override the planning commission's vote with 6 votes. And, the TIG structure and communication, that should happen. That's not going to rezone all the properties. That's the next step. But simply to clarify that creating these 2 new zoning categories is something that needs to happen and isn't threatening. I'm hopeful that that's going to happen. Then the next step is to address the council-initiated rezoning for the appropriate properties, which will be a lot of communication there, Pam. So what you're discussing, There is going to be a whole lot of discussion of the criteria, the reviews, what looks like, acts like, and should stay that. And so there will be plenty of opportunity. The next step is basically once it comes back from the Lanai and Molokai planning commissions to the council, that the council discusses, passes this, so that we simply have what the administration and the planning department need, which is 2 new zoning categories. And then with that step, then the actual potential rezoning of properties can commence. So that's where my optimism is. I think that should pass and will occur. Hopefully,
do you feel it would be helpful for the administration to come out and share this intent, more publicly come out and help educate on this matter, to have the administration and planning commission come out and explain why they were supportive of this bill? I mean, this measure to create this?
I believe so. There again, putting it within the context. This is constructive. It's not threatening. It's not undermining Bill 9. What it's doing is it's enabling Bill 9 to have a path forward and makes it more defendable. And so I firmly believe and I'm hopeful that the administration and the planning department was supportive of its creation. They participated in the creation. The council 8-1 was supportive of it, sending it to the planning commission. When it comes back from the planning commission, 6 votes will enable it to become law, which will enable the planning department to now have 2 new zoning categories, which will enable a potential rezoning of properties. So it just sort of straightens out a misunderstanding is my hope. And that's for all parties, even the people who are adamantly supportive of Bill 9. I'm hoping they understand this is not necessarily undermining Bill 9. It's enabling us to identify and get as much local housing as possible from existing residences.
Yeah, again, that's exactly what we need, and I hope that the administration and I hope the mayor and the department will come out and help educate on this, because it is a solution. It is a tool, as you say. It doesn't automatically convert these units. There's still further review. They'd have to apply. Let's be honest. We expect many would apply. I know there's people who say, and this was true during the review of Bill 9, and I keep hating to go back to Bill 9 because this was a different measure. But you also mentioned, right, there's still some question about units on the list on whether they should be on the list or not on the list, and people are still trying to figure that out, and it moved forward without us fully getting that all done, but that's because the TIG came up with these recommendations, and I think it's really important to also remind the public that you mentioned it was a very balanced temporary investigative group. The county council members who were reviewing Bill 9, right, were put forward this bill as a mitigating measure for many important reasons, because of the broader impact. The impact, when we talk about revenue, yes, we have a housing crisis, and that impacts it impacts our entire community. Everybody is concerned about our housing crisis, whether you're in a home or not. I live in a home. Actually, right now I'm back living with my mother because I sold my home to try and invest in land so we could have more land for future generations and housing down the road. And not everybody can do that. But the thing is, we've got to find housing solutions. It is critical to all of our ohana. But we also have to understand that when we're looking at measures that also will hurt our tax base, that means that everybody in our county is paying, right? And we're all paying anyway on housing solutions, right? Housing solutions come through tax revenue, but when we eliminate a tax revenue source or multiple tax revenue sources, right? Because there's also a portion of the transient accommodations tax that we get on Maui. So when we see less visitors coming, when we take categories out of higher real property taxes that could come into our coffers, then we as the residents are also going to be paying higher end taxes to sustain the overall needs and services of our community. And so we're really trying to balance. Again, housing is a critical need, but we've got to find more comprehensive solutions. And now we're seeing lawsuits, and I know, Tom, you can't really talk about the lawsuits because, again, these are things that the county council will be taking up. But one of the things that was shared during Bill 9, and we thought would somewhat be eliminated, not eliminated, but alleviated by this bill, was the fact that with these zoning categories, there we're looking at what was legitimately, how do we separate things out from what was legitimately meant to be those kind of units that just needed appropriate zoning, because we didn't have the zoning back then for that. If we'd had it, they would have been zoned and we wouldn't be going through all of this issue. But we didn't have it back then. We didn't have the same terminology that we use now. So is there any part of this rezoning opportunity that would alleviate or help to alleviate some of the devastation and revenue loss we're going to see, with the lawsuits forthcoming?
Yeah, you're correct. I can't comment on the lawsuits at all, but I think that the opportunity for us to demonstrate good governance and fairness, that's our responsibility, the administration and the council, is that if you're changing land use, you're doing it in a legal, fair way. And I think that that's the direction we're heading. That's the intent. And hopefully the community will understand that it's in their best interest for us to do this in a constructive manner and not just with a sort of an emotional reactive measure. I understand that, but that's not, you go to court, emotions don't count, except for you're just going to be sad and angry. And anyway, I'm going to stay optimistic. I think that we'll be able to address this in the council. I think that we're going to be able to move forward. I'm an advocate of the county and the state purchasing property. I call it Hawaiian homes for the rest of us.
Yeah.
The fact that you can own your home without conditions, but it is you're limiting the speculative aspects of it because it's leased land, and the leased land has conditions. And so you should be able to get a conventional, and this is structure. We need to structure, but a conventional mortgage, and you can get whatever deductions and qualifications that people may qualify for. And we're going to have to do more multifamily housing. We're going to have to do more, go a little bit vertical. Single family residences from here to Pukalani is not necessarily going to solve the next 7 generations. So we need to hopefully have dwelling units, family units that are expandable. That's why I like the new Ohana bill and the the increased density on existing sites. Ag lots, if they were rural. So instead of mandatory 2 acres, you could be rural, which is be 4 lots. Families could potentially, on a 2-acre lot, have 4 homes for their families. Even if they rented one out and they lived in 3. So there's a lot of opportunity. Right. We need to, and we're capable of managing our water resources. One of our real water resource that we're not utilizing is our stormwater. And by mitigating the flooding in South Maui, detention basins, retention basins up on the mountain to keep the sediment out of the ocean and enable all of the water or a majority of the water or some of the water to recharge the aquifer, and then tapping into the aquifers that aren't currently being used. I mean, there are sustainable, regenerative ways that we can responsibly manage our water resources, responsibly utilize all of our R1 recycled water for irrigation, free up potable water where possible, composting, and, all of these things are really possible. I think for me as a builder, our challenges are social and political, not financial or technical. We can, it's amazing what you can build and do. And when many hands lighten the load, our community working together for a common goal, we can get a lot done. We just need to stop the squabbling.
I wholeheartedly agree. I absolutely agree, and I appreciate that you're also talking about these sustainable solutions on our resources. Absolutely, there are solutions, and I think again we have to create the forum and a way to come together. The Maui Economic Recovery Commission is a step of that bringing different groups together to work together on looking at all sorts of things, and there are many movements within the destination management group as they're looking at how do we address hotspots, so that, and I sit on that review committee, so that again we lessen the negative impacts of tourism while improving the positive impacts of tourism. But these are tough issues, and again, infrastructure and how we address that is so critical to our housing. But we can find a way. I am optimistic and hopeful because, as you mentioned, the TIG through council members created the TIG. Council members supported, this bill to move forward to the Planning Commission. And I hope that they will have a supermajority vote again, because it's just a step. The dialogue continues. It's just a movement and a step, and it really at this point is just a step. It's not going to get our lost revenue back at this point, right? That's still going to be lost right now as things continue to go down the path that they're currently going. But it's a step to look at improved solutions moving forward, and I really hope that we find ways to do that. Tom, I want to give you a moment, just kind of Any final thoughts on just moving it forward? And we've shared a lot today, and I really appreciate you being on the show with us to cover this and help people better understand why this measure was put before the Planning Commission.
Well, thank you for the invitation, and I'm available to talk to anybody anytime. I'm hopeful that we collectively as a community can address many of our issues. I share the concerns about our environment, carrying capacity, resources, and I think that that's it's a challenge and an opportunity. The challenge is that we agree on concepts, but we're not agreeing on action items. But the opportunity is, since we do agree on concepts of what we need to do to maintain the special place that we call home, that we're fortunate enough to call home, that we will be able to come together in some manner. So I don't know. I just think being optimistic and not, being receptive. And if somebody doesn't agree, just allow them their views and hope that through patience and aloha, we can come together.
That was beautifully said, Tom. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you, and I hope you have a blessed and beautiful rest of your week.
Thanks, Pam, and thank you all for the opportunity to share. And let's all keep working on this together. And keep Maui no Ko'oi.
Absolutely. Let's keep Maui no Ko'oi. Thank you so much. Well, I just so appreciate Tom coming on. We mentioned this last week that this was coming up. It was such a critical issue, and so just really want to thank Tom for coming in and sharing his thoughts. The work will continue. I also want to quickly just say thank you to all of our amazing sponsors for our BizMix Maui annual fundraiser for the Chamber for Stetsons and Stilettos. We had an amazing night on Saturday, and the funds raised will continue to help support the Chamber and help us meet the needs of many businesses and community members who are coming to us for help that are not members. And so it's a way for us to leverage the work we do to support more as they continue to grow and rebuild, both after the wildfires as well as just our slow economy right now. It's a very tough time for many businesses. So thanks to all who contributed and were a part of that great event. For all who are listening, thank you for joining us for Business Matters. We hope you'll join us again next Tuesday to continue to learn more and be a part of amazing solutions. We need to work together. Blessings and aloha for a beautiful week. A hui hou.